swastika flew over Buckingham Palace on the morning of October 3, 1940, and by noon the maps of the world had begun to lie. Democracy, as an idea with an army behind it, had roughly 4 years left to live. It began with a sky. In late September of 1940, the Royal Air Force was bleeding pilots faster than Britain could train them, and in this telling the Luftwaffe made one crucial change: they never stopped hammering the airfields. They did not turn to bomb London for revenge. They kept killing planes on the ground. Within 2 weeks, the RAF could no longer contest the Channel, and the barges that Germany had gathered along the French coast, the ones that in our world rotted unused, finally moved. The invasion came on a grey dawn with the sea flat as slate. Kent fell first, then Sussex. The British government did not surrender so much as scatter, Churchill and the War Cabinet slipping north towards Scotland, then across the water to Canada, carrying with them the fiction that Britain still existed as a fighting power. But the island itself belonged to the occupier now, and in the ports the sound that replaced the gulls was the tramp of boots on cobblestone. Understand what the world lost in that single autumn. No island fortress, no launching pad for a return to Europe, no Lend-Lease harbor, no bomber bases in Norfolk, no D-Day waiting 3 years down the road. The door back into the continent slammed shut, and it would not reopen. If you find these turning points as chilling as I do, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, and tell me in the comments which alternate timeline you want me to walk through next. Now turn east, because the war was truly decided on the far plains of Russia. In this world, Hitler did not waste 6 precious weeks in the summer of 1941 diverting his tanks toward Kiev. The panzers drove straight for the heart. By late October, the spires of the Kremlin were visible through field glasses, and the autumn rains that historically swallowed the German advance in mud came late and light. The first snows held off just long enough. Moscow fell before Christmas. Stalin, in our timeline, chose to stay in the city and steady his people. Here the encirclement was too fast, the panic too total. The Soviet state, so dependent on its rail hubs and its central authority, cracked along the fault line that ran straight through its captured capital. Fighting ground on in the east, beyond the Urals, for another year, but it was the fighting of a body that has already lost its heart. By the summer of 1942, the swastika and the hammer and sickle had become the same color on the map: German. Consider the arithmetic of that conquest. The wheat of Ukraine, the oil of the Caucasus, the iron and coal and endless labor of a continent stretching from the French coast to the Volga. Every fear the Allied planners had whispered in dark rooms had come true at once. A single power now controlled the resources of the entire old world. And America? This is the revelation that unsettles people most. Without a British base to fight from, and with Hitler wisely declining to declare war after Pearl Harbor, the United States turned its fury westward toward Japan alone. The great American war machine that built 50,000 tanks and 100,000 aircraft never crossed the Atlantic. There was no beach to storm, no Europe to liberate. Washington and Berlin regarded each other across an ocean like 2 continents on separate planets, armed, wary, and utterly divided. So there was no Cold War. There could not be. A Cold War needs 2 rivals of roughly equal weight, 2 visions of the future locked in a decades-long staring contest. Here there was only the swastika, unchallenged across Eurasia, and an isolated America hoarding a single terrible secret in the deserts of New Mexico. That secret changes everything, and it changed nothing, all at once. The bomb was finished in 1945 exactly as it was in our world. But a bomb is a threat, not a plan, and you cannot occupy a continent with 3 of them. The men in Washington understood the arithmetic. To strike Berlin was to invite the ruin of New York in some near future, once Germany's own scientists captured labs, captured mines, captured uranium from a captured continent, closed the gap, and so the bomb became a wall rather than a sword. A fortress America, ringed in atomic fire, staring at a world it had decided it could not save. Now let the years turn, because the truest horror of this timeline is not the war, it is the peace. A victorious Reich did not stop. The machinery of murder that in reality was interrupted by defeat instead expanded to fill the whole of its new empire. The plans that existed only as memoranda in our world, the resettlements, the deliberate starvations, the erasure of entire peoples from the lands east of Poland, became the ordinary administration of a continent. This is the part the imagination flinches from, and it must not. The genocide did not end in 1945. It became policy, budgeted and scheduled, stretching across decades and across a landmass. The texture of daily life bent around it. In the great German cities, monstrous new architecture rose, domes larger than any cathedral, avenues wide enough to march an army down, all in the cold pale stone of a regime that mistook size for eternity. In occupied Paris, the cafes stayed open, but the newspapers printed only what Berlin permitted. In London, English children learned German as their second tongue and were taught that the empire their grandfathers built had simply changed hands, the way empires always do. Resistance did not die. It went underground, into cellars and forests, and coded radio bursts crackling through the night. Across the occupied world, small networks passed forged papers and smuggled the hunted toward neutral corners of the globe. But resistance without hope of rescue is a slow, grinding thing. In our timeline, the partisans of Europe could dream of allied armies coming. Here, no armies were coming. The listeners who huddled around hidden sets, straining for a broadcast from the free world, heard only static where liberation should have been. And yet the dream persisted, which may be the most human fact of all. Decades on, the world settled into a frozen shape no one had chosen and no one could break. A German-dominated Eurasia, aging and paranoid. A Japanese sphere across Asia and the Pacific. An armed, isolated America grown inward and afraid. No United Nations rose from the ashes because there were no shared ashes, no common victory to build upon. No European Union, no NATO, no Charter of Human Rights signed by hopeful hands in a bright post-war dawn. All of it, the imperfect, argued over architecture of the world we actually inherited, traced back to a victory that, in this telling, never happened. It comes down to margins so thin they should frighten us. A fortnight of clear weather over the English Channel. A few weeks of late autumn rain that fell, or did not fall, on the road to Moscow. The world we live in was not inevitable. It was won narrowly by people who did not know if they would win at all. Thank you for walking through this darker timeline with me, and for cherishing, a little more, the fragile and hard-won world we actually got.